In 1989, a 30-minute episode of a hit sitcom was written, filmed, and ready to go. It had a scheduled air date and was all set to be broadcast to millions of people. But at the very last second, the network pulled it. Not for a week, not for a month, but for 13 years. The episode was considered so outrageous, so beyond what was acceptable for TV, that it was locked in a vault, becoming a piece of forbidden media, lost legend fans would whisper about. What could possibly be in one episode of a sitcom that would cause a national firestorm, unite angry advertisers, and force a major network to censor its own show? This is the story of I'll See You in Court, the episode that nearly got erased from television history. To understand how a single episode of TV could cause such a massive backlash, you first have to get the show that made it. When Married, with Children premiered in April of 1987, it wasn't just another sitcom. It was a Molotov cocktail tossed right into the clean, perfect living rooms of 1980s television. This was the era of the wholesome family comedy. Shows like The Cosby Show, Family Ties, and Growing Pains were everywhere, presenting this warm, sanitized version of the American family. In those worlds, dads were wise, moms were nurturing, and every single problem could be solved with a heartfelt chat and a group hug right before the credits. These were the families of Reagan's America, stable, loving, and just nice. Then, along came the Bundys from the new Fox network, a channel desperate to make a name for itself. And the Bundys were the exact opposite of everything TV told us a family was supposed to be. The show was designed from the ground up to be an attack on the sweet, idealized sitcoms of the day. Where other shows gave you comfort, Married, with Children gave you chaos. Where they showed harmony, the Bundys showed gleeful dysfunction. At the head of the family was Al Bundy, a man whose glory days were a tiny speck in his rearview mirror. He was a former high school football hero who once scored 4 touchdowns in a single game. Now, he was a miserable women's shoe salesman, completely defeated by life. His wife, Peggy, was his perfect opposite. She was a lazy, bonbon-eating, shopping-addicted housewife who flat-out refused to cook or clean. Her main hobbies were watching trashy daytime TV and mocking Al's failures in his job and in the bedroom. Their kids, Kelly and Bud, weren't any better. Kelly was the classic, dumb blonde, pretty, popular, and totally clueless. Bud was the scheming, perpetually horny younger brother, whose desperate plans to lose his virginity always ended in failure. The Bundys didn't just poke holes in the family sitcom formula, they took a sledgehammer to it. In their world, family wasn't a blessing, it was a curse. Al constantly called his wife and kids the reason his life was a living nightmare. The show's humor was built on insults, bitterness, and a genuine love of failure. It was crude, it was vulgar, and for a huge part of the audience that felt zero connection to the perfect families on other channels, it was refreshingly honest. It showed the messy, frustrating side of family life that other shows pretended didn't exist. This was the first time a sitcom showed a family that wasn't just flawed but seemed to love how awful they were. This unapologetic, anti-family attitude is exactly what made it a smash hit for Fox, helping to put the new channel on the map as a real competitor to the Big Three networks. But that same quality also painted a giant target on its back. From the very first season, the show was a magnet for criticism, and as it got more popular, so did the outrage. The Bundys were on a collision course with the moral watchdogs of America, and in their 3rd season, that crash finally happened, all because of an episode deemed too hot for TV. The infamous lost episode, titled I'll See You in Court, was supposed to air on February 19, 1989. Like a lot of classic Married, with Children plots, it all starts with the pathetic state of Al and Peggy's marriage, specifically, their non-existent sex life. After hearing some advice from a TV sexpert, Peggy decides the best way to spice things up is to try a new, exciting location. She books a room at a seedy motel with the wonderfully unsubtle name, the Hop-On Inn. When they get there, Al is his usual miserable self, totally uninterested in Peggy's plan. As they're settling in, they find a videotape left in the VCR. They press play, and are immediately confronted with a grainy, amateur sex tape. To their shock, they realize the enthusiastic couple on screen are none other than their yuppie neighbors, Steve and Marcy Rhodes, who had apparently stayed in that same room. Peggy is bizarrely turned on by the whole thing and manages to get Al into a brief, unenthusiastic encounter. The next day, the Bundys can't wait to show the tape to Steve and Marcy, who are horrified. Their embarrassment turns to rage when they realize the motel owners secretly recorded them. The panic really sets in when Steve points out that if they were filmed, the Bundys probably were, too. While Al and Marcy want revenge, Peggy and Steve see dollar signs. They decide to sue the Hop-On-In for invasion of privacy, dreaming of a huge payday. This is where the episode started to get risky for 1980s network TV. The plot alone, with sex tapes and voyeurism, was already pushing it. But the real trouble was in the second half. The courtroom scenes. Steve, trying to save money, decides to represent both couples himself. The trial immediately turns into a classic Bundy-style disaster. Steve's opening statement is so boring it puts the judge to sleep. Then comes the main joke of the episode, showing the sex tapes as evidence in court. First, the jury watches Steve and Marcy's tape. It's a long, passionate video, and when it's over, the entire courtroom, including the judge, gives them a round of applause. Then, it's the Bundys' turn. Steve plays their tape, and it's over in a few seconds. The courtroom is just silent and confused. The defense attorney argues that nothing could have possibly happened in that short a time. To prove the point, the jury asks to see the tape again, and again, and again, sometimes in slow motion, just trying to spot any action at all. This gag, the public, repeated screening of the Bundys' hilariously pathetic intimate moment, was the comedic heart of the episode. The trial ends with the Rhodeses winning a $10,000 settlement, while the Bundys get absolutely nothing because the jury just isn't convinced anything actually happened on their tape. In a final act of defiance, Al decides to prove his manhood to Peggy right there on the judge's bench, leading to a marathon session that, ironically, gets caught by the courtroom security cameras. By today's standards, the whole thing seems pretty tame. But in 1989, it was a different world. The script was packed with jokes and innuendos that network censors hated. According to the show's creator, Michael Moy, a normal episode might get 2 or 3 notes from the censors. "I'll See You in Court" got 15. The network had huge problems with the repeated playing of the sex tape and demanded a ton of dialogue be cut. The show's creators, Ron Levitt and Michael Moy, felt that making those changes would completely ruin the episode. They made a few small tweaks but refused to back down on the main jokes. They believed this was the whole point of the show, taking a sleazy premise and pushing it to its most absurd conclusion. Moy even said the episode was inspired by a real news story about a motel owner who was secretly filming his guests. With the network refusing to air it and the creators refusing to change it, Fox made a drastic choice. They pulled the episode from the schedule completely, and "I'll See You in Court" officially became the lost episode. But this fight inside the network was only half the story. Outside the studio, a storm was brewing that was about to make this whole thing a national headline. Fox's decision to shelve "I'll See You in Court" didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the direct result of a pressure campaign that had been building for months, led by one very determined woman from Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, Terry Ricalta. Ricalta said she was watching TV with her kids on January 15, 1989, when she stumbled upon an episode of Married, with Children. The episode that set her off was titled "Her Cups Runneth Over," where Al goes on a desperate search for Peggy's favorite, but now discontinued, bra. The episode had jokes about S&M, a scene with a man in a tiara, and shots of Al staring at a lingerie model. To Ricalta, this wasn't funny, it was softcore pornography being broadcast when kids could be watching. She was appalled. So, she didn't just change the channel, she decided to fight back. She started a one-woman letter writing campaign, going after the corporate sponsors who paid for the show. She wrote to over 40 of the show's advertisers, including huge companies like Procter & Gamble, McDonald's, and Coca-Cola, telling them to pull their support from what she called filth. In a world before the internet, this was a massive undertaking, but it worked. Advertisers hate controversy. The last thing a company wants is their family-friendly brand associated with a media firestorm. Ricalta's campaign started to work. A few major sponsors got nervous and either pulled their ads or promised not to advertise on the show again. The story of a Michigan mom taking on a hit TV show was just too good for the media to ignore. Soon, Ricalta was on the front page of the New York Times and appearing on big news programs like Nightline. She became the face of a cultural backlash against TV, and Married, with Children was her main target. This put Fox in a really tough spot. On one hand, the show was their breakout hit, it was defining their entire brand as the edgy alternative. But on the other hand, they were a young network that couldn't afford an advertiser boycott. The Ricalta campaign was a real threat to their bottom line. That it was in this tense, high-pressure environment that the script for "I'll See You in Court" landed on their desks. The timing couldn't have been worse. Coming right after the "Her Cups Runneth Over" controversy, an episode about sex tapes felt like pouring gasoline on a bonfire. Fox had also just clashed with the creators over another episode, originally called "A Period Piece," which the network temporarily pulled before airing it under the much tamer. With advertisers already jumpy and Ricalta's campaign making headlines, the executives panicked. They saw "I'll See You in Court" not as a funny episode, but as a bomb that could blow up in their faces, making the boycott even worse. Their demand for 15 huge changes was their attempt to make the episode completely safe. But the show's creators saw it as cowardice. They had built their careers on pushing boundaries, not backing down. Caught between their stubborn creators and a PR nightmare, the network chose what they thought was the safest option: they buried the episode. They hoped that by hiding it, they could calm down the advertisers and wait for the whole thing to blow over. "I'll See You in Court" became a casualty of the culture war, sacrificed to protect the network. The episode that was filmed, edited, and ready to go just vanished. Pulling "I'll See You in Court" was the peak of the controversy, but the story was far from over. In the immediate aftermath, Fox tried to do damage control. To make sponsors happy, they moved Married, with Children to a later, more adult, 9 p.m. time slot. The network also started looking over scripts much more carefully, and for a little while, the writers had to be more cautious. Michael Moye even admitted that everyone at Fox was a tad more nervous, and a planned episode about Al getting a circumcision was scrapped completely. For a moment, it looked like Terry Ricalta had won. She had pressured a network, scared off advertisers, and forced a hit show to tone itself down. It seemed like censorship had worked, but then, something nobody expected happened. The very controversy that was supposed to kill the show ended up being the best thing that ever happened to it. The story of the boycott and the lost episode became a national sensation. Suddenly, Married, with Children wasn't just a sitcom, it was a cultural event at the center of a debate about free speech and censorship. All that media coverage was basically a massive, free advertising campaign. People who had never even heard of the Bundys were now curious. The Streisand effect kicked in hard, telling people they shouldn't watch something only made them want to watch it more. The results were incredible. In the weeks after the controversy hit its peak, the show's ratings didn't just hold steady, they exploded. Viewership doubled. The publicity turned the show from a solid hit into a ratings monster for Fox. The very people who tried to destroy the Bundys had accidentally made them more famous and successful than ever. The cast knew how ironic it was. Katie Sagal, who played Peggy, joked that they sent Terry Ricalta flowers every year to say thanks. She said, She tried to get us off the air, and all it did was get us on the front of the New York Times. And it doubled our audience. For Fox, the lesson was obvious. The short-term panic led to censorship, but the long-term reality was that controversy sells. The advertisers who had run away quickly realized their mistake and quietly came back. This Bundy bump cemented the show's place on television and gave the creators even more power in the long run. The show would go on for 11 seasons, becoming one of the longest-running sitcoms in TV history, its legacy defined by the very boundaries it broke. As for the lost episode, it stayed in the vault, at least in America. It was broadcast uncut in other countries during the 90s, but US fans could only read about it. The fact that it was banned only made it more legendary. It wasn't until June 18, 2002, 5 years after the show had already ended, that I'll See You in Court finally aired in the US on the cable channel FX. And even then, it was an edited version. The fully uncut episode wouldn't be available until the DVD box sets came out. When people finally saw it, the reaction was mostly surprise. After 13 years of hype, many found the episode to be surprisingly tame. Creator Michael Moye said viewers were shocked by how innocent it really was. The jokes that seemed so scandalous in 1989 just didn't hit the same way in the 21st century. Moye thought the whole thing was hilarious, saying the massive overreaction from the network was, in itself, as funny to me as the episode itself. The story of I'll See You in Court is a wild chapter in TV history, but the debate it started is still relevant today. So what do you think? Did Fox totally overreact by pulling the episode, or was the backlash from people like Terry Rakolta understandable for the time? And maybe more importantly, if this exact same episode aired for the first time on network TV today, would anyone even blink? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you like deep dives into TV history, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more. The saga of I'll See You in Court is way more than a story about one banned episode. It's a snapshot of a cultural turning point. Married with Children didn't just push the envelope, it tore the envelope to shreds and proved there was a huge audience for comedy that was raw, cynical, and unapologetically broken. The controversy was really a battle for the soul of the American sitcom, pitting old-school family values against a much sharper, satirical kind of humor. Ironically, the backlash is what cemented the show's legacy. By trying to shut the Bundys up, the activists just made their voices louder, turning them into icons of anti-establishment comedy. The show's incredible success paved the way for a whole new generation of edgy, adult-focused comedies. It's hard to imagine shows like The Simpsons, Seinfeld, South Park, or It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia having the freedom they did without the Bundys kicking the door down first. They all owe a little something to that crude, grumpy, and hilariously controversial family from Chicago. Today, I'll See You in Court feels like a relic from a different time. The content that was once too scandalous for TV would barely cause a ripple now. The episode is proof of how much TV has changed, and it's a perfect reminder of the constant tug-of-war between creative freedom, corporate fear, and public opinion. It was the controversial episode that took Married with Children off the air, but in doing so, it made sure the show would never be forgotten.